thank you for coming back for segment 3 of our video series. We're calling this series America Under Fire, The Old Guy Speaks. Segment 3, this segment, is on the proposed future of the U.S. dollar. The proposed future of the dollar is as a digital dollar. Subtitle, Brave New World. We've entered the digital age with all that portends. Things like mass surveillance and all of our financial, medical, and other information digitized and available online. Now we are faced with proposals for a central bank digital currency, CBDC, a digital dollar, and that prospect should make your blood run cold. Digital currency is a Marxist dream. It can provide nearly complete control of the citizenry. Control by whom? By a self-appointed elite with Marxist ambitions. And we'll cover that a little more later. By definition, a central bank digital currency is programmable. It can be programmed to achieve whatever degree of control is desired by the government and by the elites. You'd have a government-issued card with your money on it, and for many or most people, it might well evolve into your sole source of funds. Factor in that 61% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and that many of those would have trouble meeting an unexpected $400 expense. We are very vulnerable. The government could control all of your financial transactions, making digital currency a massive surveillance tool to enforce a social credit scoring system, as China is starting to do. If you speak out against the regime, you fail to parrot the party line, you fail to do certain things, there can be consequences. Let me flesh that out just a bit with 4 examples of consequences you could find when digital currency. Consequence number 1. Some purchases could be limited or even banned entirely. You may find that your card won't work for an increasing number of purchases. Maybe it won't work for train and plane tickets. Maybe it won't work to get your kids into good schools and good colleges. Maybe it won't work for certain foods, sinful meats, and so on. There can be growing limits on buying any number of foods, or limits at the gas pump, even no gas at all if you've used your allocation. There could be limits on or decreasing access to most anything you can name. Consequence number 2, custom pricing. You may find that goods and services, anything at all, is priced on your card according to your income, your skin color, your gender, your browsing history, your voting history, your neighborhood, the car you own, your job, your portfolio, anything at all. Prices can be customized for your card and your currency. Consequence number 3, charges on that card. You may see a carbon tax charge on that card. Maybe you bought more gasoline than you should have last month. You could find taxes of various sorts. You can, and I believe you will, find negative interest rates. Negative interest rates mean that you pay the bank, namely the government, for holding your money instead of them paying you interest, you pay them interest. So negative interest rates. How about church attendance? You could find a charge on your card for having attended church or for any other non-Marxist behavior. So that's consequence number 2, charges. Excuse me, that was number 3. Number 4 is expiration dates on your money. You either spend it by a certain date or you lose it. And that would happen whenever the regime wants to goose the economy. They just tell you your money won't last and you must spend it by a date certain. So 4 consequences, examples of consequences. As AI, artificial intelligence, advances, you might find control of not just our behaviors, but our mindsets, our very beings. We could become something akin to robots. CBDCs are designed and intended to undermine individual freedom and autonomy. They facilitate a fear-based centralization of power, bringing authoritarianism or totalitarianism. I use those two interchangeably. At this point, I want to recommend a book to you. A book entitled The Final Countdown by a man named Aaron Day. Aaron Day is a successful businessman who conducted a brief presidential campaign to bring attention to this book, which covers everything you want and should know about digital currency. I want to give you one quote from Aaron Day's book. CBDCs, this is a quote, CBDCs as centralized versions of fiat currencies pose an existential threat to humanity. That's an incredible quote. I recommend you read this book and see what else he has to say. Aaron Day, The Final Countdown. Let me turn now to 3 of what will probably be several precursors to the rollout of a U.S. Central Bank Digital Currency. The first precursor has already happened. It's called the FedNow system, capital F-E-D, capital N-O-W, one word. FedNow went into effect around September of 2023. It's a U.S. government instant payment and real-time settlement system among banks. It replaces an earlier version, and in and of itself, just for its own sake, it is a great advance in technology in terms of interbank settlements. But FedNow is also a Trojan horse. It has provided the required digital infrastructure for the rollout of a CBDC. So FedNow, the first precursor, is already in effect, and the digital infrastructure for a CBDC is now in place. Precursor number 2, virtual online currencies issued by large businesses like Amazon, Google, or other internet giants with discount incentives for you to use their currency rather than a credit card. And just by chance, a U.S. CBDC would then sync seamlessly with these online currencies that had preconditioned you to accept the concept. And they did it by offering discounts. Precursor number 3. You'll know we're getting close when you hear of proposals for UBI. UBI meaning Universal Basic Income. The idea has been around forever. The government just sends everyone a monthly payment. It's currently being stoked as a hot topic with the argument that AI, artificial intelligence, may displace a lot of jobs and people will need income. And here's the kicker. UBI will be available to us only as a digital currency. Would you take it? Yeah, I will too. I will too. So when you hear of UBI, that's getting us close also. Moving along, I do think that the Fed and the deciders may still need a crisis in order to force the adoption of a central bank digital currency. And here's one possibility for that. There's already a very high likelihood, almost a certainty, of the Federal Reserve printing money until inflation gets completely out of control. Then they would pitch CBDCs as the solution. Other potential crises to force a CBDC through the Congress might be a war or a new pandemic. As an aside, did you notice on UBI that UBI sure resembles that corn you were throwing over the fence to domesticate those wild pigs? UBI is a very good example of that. Globally, 114 nations are studying or pursuing digital currency in various stages, the U.S. being among them. In the U.S., we have Executive Order 14067, March 9 of 2022. It's a sweeping executive order, and the centerpiece, of course, is the development and implementation of a CBDC. Let me give you a quote from a man named Jim Rickards, who's a guy that I highly respect, and I'll be speaking of him later. This from Jim Rickards, quote, "The order is a missed opportunity to promote innovation and competition in the payment system. It is a recipe for government control and surveillance," close quote. Even before that executive order, the U.S. was researching, developing, and piloting digital currency. You'll find the details in that Aaron Day book that I mentioned, The Final Countdown. The executive order also called for U.S. cooperation with several international bodies, starting with the UN, the United Nations. The UN was begun in 1945, at the end of World War II, to bring about a better future on this globe. But it has evolved from noble objectives like world peace to advocating and facilitating centralized global governance and control. It has lost its way, become a tyrant. Check out the UN's Agenda 2030. It has 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. The titles of those goals sound so good, but Marxists, you must recall, Marxists share your vocabulary. They do not share your dictionary. The way that they use words, their intent and their definitions of words are different than yours or mine. So these Sustainable Development Goals are worded well, but they're all oriented toward and intended to facilitate a one world, one government controlling body. Cooperating with the UN on central bank digital currencies are 3 other public entities and 1 private entity that provide technical assistance to governments, advocacy, how-to manuals, everything related to CBDCs. The first of these public entities is the World Bank, also started at the end of World War II to carry out the reconstruction of war-torn nations. The World Bank is now helping struggling nations with helping in quotes. I understand there's some controversy connected with that. I haven't looked into it. Second public body cooperating with the UN is the International Monetary Fund. It had been founded to provide monetary aid to economically challenged nations. The third public cooperator with the UN is the Bank of International Settlements, the BIS. The BIS is the central banker to the central banks of the world. All of our national central banks clear their transactions with each other through the BIS, Central Bank of the Central Bankers. Somewhere among those three entities, there is a global digital currency also in development. We turn now to the private entity that's cooperating with the UN to bring about CBDCs. It's the World Economic Forum, the WEF. The WEF was founded in 1971 by a Swiss guy named Klaus Schwab. They're the people that have annual meetings in Davos, Switzerland. They fly in their private jets, and they send out news releases castigating us for our carbon footprints after they had flown in and so on. Schwab is quoted by many as saying that by 2030, quote, "You will own nothing and you will be happy," unquote. This guy's more than a few fries shy of a Happy Meal. So we have to watch the WEF very closely. WEF started as a consortium of European business leaders pushing stakeholder capitalism, stakeholder as compared to shareholder capitalism, and we'll be discussing that a little later on. But the WEF has now assumed a greatly expanded mission, all of it evil. It is a powerful hub for the global centralization of power and control, with control being in caps. WEF is working toward a world controlled by a small elite of the rich and famous, and all the rest of us would be peons. Some say they're building a road for us, the road to serfdom. All but a few elites would be poor. The WEF is relentlessly pushing CBDCs. They're collaborating with central banks to develop CBDCs. They have a CBDC toolkit for the design and deployment of CBDCs. They publish CBDC research. They support pilot projects. And they propose using CBDCs to monitor individuals' carbon footprints and other parameters. Squib. This from Elon Musk. Quote, not yet. Elon Musk says that the World Economic Forum, quote, is increasingly becoming an unelected world government that the people never asked for and don't want. I certainly agree with that. The World Economic Forum pushes what they call a Great Reset. That is essentially a global coup d'etat to subvert and replace the authority of sovereign elected national governments, taking us to a new world order controlled by these few unelected global elites, a centralization of power initiative. You will own nothing, and you will be happy. They seek to instill fear and a sense of urgency using phony doomsday narratives like climate change to sell their radical restructuring of existing economic and societal systems. Try reading their stuff. It is truly bafflegab and doesn't mean what it appears to say. Can you make a falsehood true just by repeatedly asserting it to be true? That's apparently doable. Vladimir Lenin has said so. Some of America's leading WEF members are very interesting to me in terms of how they gain their power and their wealth. And I just learned this. I just learned that large financial firms that aggregate shares of U.S. companies into mutual funds and ETFs, ETF being exchange-traded funds, then sell you shares of those funds to help you diversify your investing. And that can be a good thing. You then own a portion of their mutual fund or ETF, but they own the company shares that they buy in order to create those mutual funds and ETFs. When they get really big, they own major or even controlling interests in these companies and can exercise extraordinary power over them. And we'll also have more on that later. Just a sidebar here. This goes through my head. In the past, a strong leader, a dictator, a malevolent movement could take control of a nation and subdue it. With our new digital capabilities, including AI, is it conceivable that evil could now control us worldwide? I sure hope not. So anyway, that's an introduction to digital currency, which I personally rank as the number one threat to both individual well-being and to maintaining civil order in the U.S. As has been said, when the money goes, everything goes. And we're going to break at this point. We have finished up with digital currency. We'll go to break and come back with segment 4 of this series, which will be reserve currency. Look forward to seeing you back then. Thank you.